Today is Christ the King Sunday, or Reign of Christ Sunday. Christ the King Sunday is celebrated the last Sunday of Advent, before Advent, marking the end of the liturgical year. This feast celebrates the kingship of Jesus Christ over all creation, which is understood not as a worldly rule, but as a spiritual and cosmic reign. This Sunday, the emphasis is on love, service, and obedience to God's law rather than military or political power. It focuses on servant leadership model of Christ and the call to love one's neighbor. As I have watched the hate, violence, lying, bigotry, and downright cruelty going on around me since January, I have struggled with how to reconcile it with the gospel that comes out of those same quarters. So today I decided to focus on scriptures that point us to what we are called to do and to be if we practice the gospel that we preach and assert that we believe. I started with the two scriptures we heard this morning, and then I began searching for others that instruct us on how to live with each other and those around us. I remembered this scripture from Amos, which happens to be one of my favorites, from Amos 5:21 to 24. I despise your festivals, and I take no delight in your solemn assemblies. Even though you offer me your burnt offerings and grain offerings, I will not accept them. And the offerings of well-being of your fatted animals I will not look upon. Take away from me the noise of your songs. I will not listen to the melody of your harps. But let justice roll down like water and righteousness like an ever-flowing stream. And from Leviticus 19, there are a couple of laws from the Holiness Code that seems instructional for us in our current situation. Leviticus 19, 9 to 10, when you reap the harvest of your land, you shall not reap to the very edges of your field or gather the gleanings of your harvest. You shall not strip your vineyard bare or gather the fallen grapes of your vineyard. You shall leave them for the poor and the alien. I am the Lord, your God. And if you remember the story of Ruth and Naomi, Ruth was the daughter-in-law of Naomi, and Naomi instructs Ruth to go into the fields of Boaz because she knew him, and she knew because of the commandment that there would be grain left at the edges of the field for those in need. While we are not all farmers, this verse instructs us to care for foreigners, yes, even those undocumented folks, and the poor in our midst. There is so much we can do. We can advocate for their rights. We can give food to food pantries and to other organizations that provide assistance. We can write, we can call, we can email, we can contact our government representatives and call on them to vote for and introduce legislation that advocates for the rights of those in need. And as I looked on from Leviticus 19:33 to 34, it says, when the alien resides with you in your land, you shall not oppose the alien. The alien who resides with you shall be to you as the native born among you. You shall love the alien as yourself, for you were aliens in the land of Egypt. I am the Lord your God. So what can we do? We can protest the unfair practices. We can once again contact our government representatives and call on them to vote and to introduce legislation for laws to protect those who live among us. Yes, even the undocumented ones. And in Matthew 22:36 to 40, Jesus was asked, Teacher, which commandment in the law is greatest? And he said, you shall love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your mind, and with all your soul. You shall love, that is the first and the greatest commandment. And the second is like it. You shall love your neighbor as yourself. On these two commandments hang all the laws and the prophets. If you recall, Jesus goes on then to tell the story of the hated Samaritan who acted to care for a traveler who was beaten and robbed when others would not. He held up the Samaritan's actions as exemplary and went on to remind us that our neighbor is someone who has a need. It doesn't matter who they are or whether we like them or not. And I found these words from Isaiah 2, 1-4, instructive. The word that Isaiah, son of Amos, saw concerning Judah and Jerusalem: in the days to come, the mountain of the Lord's house shall be established as the highest mountains, and shall be raised among the hills. All the nations shall stream to it. Many peoples shall come and say, come, let us go up to the mountain of the Lord, to the house of the God of Jacob, and that he may teach us his ways, and that we may walk in his paths. For out of Zion shall go forth instruction, and the word of the Lord from Jerusalem. He shall judge nation between the nations, and shall arbitrate for many peoples. They shall beat their swords into plowshares, and their spears into pruning hooks. And nation shall not lift up sword against nation, and neither shall they learn war anymore. For the peoples of the ancient Near East, hospitality was not just important, it was essential. In the Bible, hospitality is not only a recurring theme, it is a core value. It encompasses the welcoming and generous treatment of guests, strangers, and even enemies. It is not merely a social custom, but a demonstration of love, compassion, and a reflection of God's own welcoming nature. There are many examples of hospitality from the Hebrew Scriptures to Jesus' teachings and actions in the Christian Scriptures. Hospitality can be defined as the quality or disposition of receiving and treating guests and strangers in a warm, friendly, generous way. The Greek word translated as hospitality literally means love of stranger. In the ancient world, hospitality was seen as a sacred duty, not just a social grace. It was understood that that offering shelter, food, protection to travelers could be a matter of life or death. A central aspect of biblical hospitality is the willingness to welcome and care for those outside one's immediate circle, including strangers and foreigners. In the Bible, God is portrayed as the ultimate host, welcoming humanity into God's presence and offering grace and forgiveness. We are called to reflect this divine hospitality in our interactions with others. In the Christian Scriptures, hospitality is seen as a way to serve and honor Christ, who identifies with the least of these. Throughout the Gospels, Jesus is portrayed as the one who called out injustice and called out empire, government, and religious leaders for not doing their duty to care for the least of these. He threw the money changers out of the temple. They were ripping off the people. Jesus pursued justice for the disadvantaged, the oppressed, the poor, those that were ill, the alien, the foreigner, and all those taken advantage of or shunned by those in power. In the end, because he worked against empire government, he was executed by the state as dangerous. In Germany, Dietrich Bonhoeffer, theologian and Lutheran pastor, opposed the Nazi government from its inception. During his lifetime, he was forbidden by the government to speak, but continued to do so. He was a founding member of the Confessing Church, a Protestant resistant movement in Nazi Germany that opposed the Nazi regime's control over the German evangelical church. It emerged in the 1930s as a direct challenge to the German Christians, a pro-Nazi faction that sought to align the church with Nazi ideology. The Confessing Church emphasized the church's allegiance to God and biblical teachings, rejecting the Nazis' politicized version of Christianity. He was arrested in April of 1943 by the Gestapo and imprisoned at Tegel prison for 1.5 years. Later, he was transferred to Flossenburg concentration camp. Bonhoeffer was arrested of being associated with the July 20th plot to assassinate Hitler and was tried along with other accused plotters, including former members of the Abwehr, the German military intelligence office. He was hanged on April 9th, 1945, during the collapse of the Nazi regime. His death came just days before Flossenburg was liberated between April 10th and 15th. One of Bonhoeffer's papers, The Theory of Stupidity, was written in a letter to 3 friends and co-workers in the conspiracy against Hitler. It should be understood, though, from the beginning that stupidity Bonhoeffer was talking about has nothing to do with intellect. Bonhoeffer asserts that stupidity is the most dangerous enemy of the good, even more so than malice. He states that against stupidity we are defenseless. Neither protest nor use of force accomplish anything here. Reason falls on deaf ears. Facts that contradicts one's prejudgment simply not be believed. When facts are irrefutable, they are just pushed aside as inconsequential, as incidental. In contrast to the malice one, the stupid person is utterly self-satisfied, and being easily irritated becomes dangerous by going on the attack. Never try to persuade the stupid person with reason, for it is senseless and dangerous. More recently, the late Walter Brueggemann, a UCC professor and theologian, in his book, In God We Do Not Trust, copyrighted 2024, asserts that Psalm 72 might be an important reference point for us now. Psalm 72 insists that it is exactly the proper role of government with its greatest resources to be in the business of equitable economic justice for the vulnerable and the disempowered. It is the work of the church in such a frame of reference to insist that the government do its proper work. This insistence of necessity opposes any small government mantra of the privileged who want there to be no interference with their easy, private economic wealth. This issue must be joined not because any of us is a bleeding heart liberal, but because government is understood in important strands of our faith as an instrument of God's restorative justice. Brueggemann further asserts, while I was pondering this psalm, I had ringing in my ears the phrasing of Arianna Huffington from long ago. She said in general, private charity is good for the support of the symphony and the opera, but when it comes to needy children, we need the raw power of government. The raw power of government has the resources and the clout to make a difference. In the psalm, the kings are urged to use the raw power of government on behalf of the weak, the poor, and the needy. In this psalm, it is more than an urging. It is a recognition that such rescue of the weak, the needy, and the poor from the hand of the oppressor is a condition for societal and environmental well-being. Bonhoeffer made it clear that the only act of liberation, not instruction, can overcome stupidity. Perhaps an act of liberation is the only thing that can make sure the government becomes an instrument of justice for all. We each have our part to play. I can't tell you what your part is. I can't tell you that your part is not without a certain amount of danger. We have seen recently that those who speak out against cruelty, injustice, are subjected to attempts to silence them. I cannot tell you how to react to our current circumstances, but I can urge you to read the scriptures and take courage from the lives of those who have lived through times of upheaval to help light the way for the rest of us. In a recent staff meeting, Pastor Jenny shared this question, and I leave it with you today. Where are you being called to show up more fully? Amen.